Tonight, the erosion of public trust, one of the findings from a review of Australia's response to the COVID pandemic. Hello, I'm Jessica Harmsen, live from Adelaide. This is ABC News. Also tonight, Liberal MP Jing Lee claims she was pressured by an external visitor prior to a vote on a controversial abortion law change. Israel passes laws designating the UN's main aid agency as a terrorist organisation. And a proposal to mine rare earth minerals in the state's southeast meets fierce opposition from the community. An independent inquiry has found Australia's COVID-19 response eroded public trust so deeply people might reject restrictions like lockdowns in a future crisis. The review hailed leaders in courageous decisions at the outset of the pandemic, but said cracks emerged as the crisis wore on. Political reporter Stephanie Dalzell has more.
Silent cities, shops shuttered, and hospitals overwhelmed. Generations changed by a once-in-a-century pandemic.
The striking conclusion, I think, from this report, though, is that right now we are arguably worse placed as a country to deal with a pandemic than we were in early 2020.
The report finding Australia's response to the pandemic drove a large decline in public trust.
Many of the measures taken during COVID-19 are unlikely to be accepted by the population again.
Delays in the vaccine rollout, prolonged restrictive public health measures and ultimately cost $31 billion. And the report said some of those measures, like school closures and lockdowns, must be used carefully.
Because of the strength of the public health response, a lot of people felt, they didn't trust what government was doing.
Heavy-handed restrictions also amounted to a lack of compassion, according to the inquiry. That's something acutely felt by Richard Smith, whose wife was in an aged care home. His family was unable to see her for months.
The distress was not only felt by the residents but by the family to see the distress that their loved ones were going through.
But despite all the issues, the report stressed Australia fared well compared to other nations.
We saved lives and we saved livelihoods, and I think Australians should be proud.
One of the recommendations has already been acted on, funding a Centre for Disease Control.
An opportunity to lay a foundation for Australia's future pandemic preparedness.
The toughest decisions on lockdowns, school and border closures and vaccine mandates were made by the states and territories and weren't directly covered by this inquiry. But even so, it was highly critical of poorly justified and disproportionate approaches to restrictions across the country. With goodwill deeply eroded, the report plants serious doubt about whether a less trusting public would even follow better targeted rules in the case of another pandemic. Stephanie Dalzell, ABC News, Canberra.
The Prime Minister has tried to rebuff suggestions he sought flight upgrades directly from Qantas CEO Alan Joyce, but having failed to clearly answer questions about his dealings with the airline boss and attacking others, he remains under scrutiny from the opposition. Here's National Affairs Editor Melissa Clark.
More questions, but not much clarity.
Did you call Alan Joyce personally for these upgrades?
Look, the idea Qantas have a number in terms of bookings that are made private bookings.
When he was Transport Minister and later Opposition Leader, Anthony Albanese received flight upgrades for personal travel to Rome, LA and London. A book by a former Nine newspaper reporter says he liaised directly with CEO Alan Joyce about it. But when pressed, the Prime Minister could only recall discussions about other flights.
I recall direct discussions with Alan Joyce over the flights, the Emirates or Qantas flight to Dubai.
And he went on many other tangents. He attacked the author of the book.
I don't see declarations that he's a former Liberal Party staffer.
He pointed to other MPs declaring flight upgrades.
Paul Fletcher's been upgraded at least 69 times.
He compared his declarations to those of the opposition leader.
I don't have a family trust. I don't have any shares.
And compared their travel arrangements.
I didn't have to declare any flights on private jets owned by billionaires like Gina Rinehart because I haven't engaged in it. As simple as that.
Except last year he did accept a private helicopter flight from trucking magnate Lindsay Fox. For all the retorts, exactly how Anthony Albanese secured those upgrades still isn't entirely clear.
He can throw mud, he can blame other people, but this is a problem of his own making.
And the opposition leader is questioning whether any of this influenced the government's decision last year to block Qatar from offering more international flights.
I think the Prime Minister should take the initiative to refer this matter to the Integrity Commission.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister calls that suggestion a pathetic attempt at creating a headline. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
A South Australian Liberal politician has apologised to her colleague for reneging on a pairing deal during a controversial vote on abortion rights earlier this month. Jing Lee has told Parliament she was pressured by an external visitor in an encounter that left her in panic mode and blinded by fear. Here's political reporter Harvey Biggs.
Under parliamentary privilege, Liberal MLC Jing Lee put on record what she says was a night of intimidation, pressure and fear.
As I've never experienced anything like it before, I went into a panic mode and my mind went blank and was blinded by fear.
In the lead up to a vote on a controversial bill brought by Liberal MP Ben Hood seeking to change South Australia's abortion laws, Ms Lee says she had an unexpected encounter in Parliament with a persistent visitor she had never met before.
The encounter with this external visitor made me feel very vulnerable on the night. I wasn't thinking clearly and was put into a compromising situation.
She reneged on an agreement to abstain from voting to even the numbers with colleague Michelle Lensink, who's undergoing treatment for breast cancer.
I make an unthinkable decision under pressure because I had a grave concern about my upper house pre-selection arising out of the various media reports.
Ms Lee is the only moderate Liberal in the upper house up for re-election in 2026. She has apologised to Ms Lensink, who made a desperate late-night dash to Parliament amid the debate before another colleague agreed to be her pair and the vote was defeated. Following her remarks, the Premier took aim at the Liberal leader, Vincent Tarzia.
What sort of show and outfit is the alternate government of the state when women are feeling as though, or any member of Parliament for that matter, is feeling as though her pre-selection is going to be compromised if she honours a pair with
order
from breast cancer?
Members to my left.
In a statement, Mr Tarzia says Ms Lee has his full support and he does not tolerate bullying, adding no person should feel unsafe or intimidated in their workplace. Harvey Biggs, ABC News.
Israel's parliament has all but banned the main UN relief agency in Gaza from delivering life-saving aid into the enclave. The UN chief says the move could have devastating consequences for the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians facing starvation.
Generations of Palestinians have called this place home. 16,000 live in the Shafat refugee camp in East Jerusalem. A community built and supported by UNRWA for decades. It was already challenging for their staff who provide services including healthcare and education to come and work here every day. Israel's parliament now making it impossible, banning it operating in Israeli territory.
Anyone who acts like a terrorist has no right to exist in the state of Israel. UNRWA is not an aid agency for refugees, it is an aid agency for Hamas.
In January, Australia joined other nations in pausing funding to UNRWA after Israel claimed the agency had employees involved in the October 7 terrorist attacks. 9 staff were fired, but a UN investigation was unable to independently verify the intelligence used by Israel to make the allegations. Australian funding resumed in March, this ban opposed by the government. The Foreign Minister posting on social media, UNRWA does life-saving work. UNRWA is the biggest provider of aid in Gaza, support which has already been reduced to a trickle. The UN's top humanitarian official has warned that the entire population in the north is now at risk of dying. Israel's ban could make it impossible for UNRWA to operate there.
You won't be able to move in Gaza without being subject to possible attack. There'll be no visas for international staff, no work permits. Supply chains will fall apart.
You guarantee more children being killed. And I'm sorry for the lack of diplomacy in my language, but I think we've moved past the idea of sugarcoating this. We will simply see more little girls and boys in Gaza unnecessarily killed.
The legislation approved by the Knesset comes into force in 90 days, a time frame which has been designed to give Israel an opportunity to make new aid arrangements for the Palestinian population. Israel's parliament backing this proposal before that crucial detail had been sorted out.
UNRWA simply must be replaced. They must be replaced with other organisations that are not infected with terrorism.
There's nobody that can replace them right now in the middle of the crisis.
Added pressure from its strongest ally, Washington today reminding Israel of an earlier threat to cut US military aid if conditions in Gaza aren't addressed.
Passage of this legislation could have implications under US law and US policy. That remains the case.
Tough talk that's done little to sway an emboldened Israel.
And our Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran filed this update from outside the UN's relief agency headquarters in Jerusalem.
Well, this legislation makes it illegal for Israeli officials to deal with UNRWA staff. The agency may try to get aid into a place like Gaza, but the IDF controls all of the entry and exit points into that territory, meaning getting the permissions and the permits required simply will not happen. And while Israel insists someone else will be able to fill the void, we do need to point out that UNRWA has been operating in this space for decades. It was set up in 1949, and replacing the huge amount of infrastructure it has and the large number of people it has will be very difficult, if not impossible, certainly within the time frame Israel has set itself. We do also need to note that this decision by the Knesset puts Israel further at odds with countries it considers its allies, its partners, its backers, and it raises questions as to how countries such as Australia deal with Israel into the future. For all of the rhetoric that's coming from Washington and Canberra insisting Israel guarantee the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, this decision by the Israeli parliament shows that Israel is prepared to ignore those demands and act as it pleases.
A massage therapist jailed for indecently assaulting his patients continued to offend even after police warned that they'd received a complaint. The district court sentenced Jason Paulhagen to 6 years in prison, describing his offences as an egregious breach of trust. The women he preyed on joined forces outside court to speak out about their ordeal.
9 women brought together through their shared trauma.
It's not anything that you wish anyone to go through. But, you know, we've all been in it together the whole time.
Individually preyed on by their massage therapist. Jason Paulhagen, now jailed by the district court for 6 years, after pleading guilty to 11 counts of indecent assault in a deal which led to 14 charges being dropped, including 7 counts of rape.
It was a slap in the face, him entering that last-minute plea of guilty, but probably still a sense of relief that it's over.
In sentencing, Judge Joanne Tracy said Hagen's offending was brazen, opportunistic and deliberate, and was committed against women in vulnerable circumstances in his home.
The judge said that when police began investigating the first complaint, they issued Hagen a warning, but that didn't stop him. She said that he preyed on his victims' shock and their fear of embarrassment and interpreted their silence as acquiescence.
Silent no more.
That's exactly why we are agreeing to be in the media. That is to hopefully give courage to other women to come forward.
54-year-old Hagen can apply for parole in 2029. Eva Blandis, ABC News.
The Premier says establishing direct flights from Adelaide to India is on the state government's agenda in coming years. On Monday, daily services between Dubai and Adelaide resumed for the first time since the COVID pandemic broke out in 2020. Restarting flights to Hong Kong are next, while Peter Malinauskas says the government's also working on securing services to Japan, the United States and India, particularly with the new merged Adelaide University opening at the start of 2026.
I was at a function on Saturday night with Adelaide University and I put to them plainly, I said, what is the most important market as far as the future of international students in South Australia is concerned? It's India.
A potential rocket pad on the Eyre Peninsula is a step closer to launch, with Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek greenlighting the project. Ms Plibersek was assessing the environmental impact of Southern Launch's Whalers Way orbital complex. It faced significant resistance from the environmental groups and the local community. Conservationists are concerned the project will impact bird species, including the endangered southern emu wren, and would force the closure of nearby beaches when a rocket is launched. Southern Launch has previously assured the public there would be minimal disturbance to bird life. The complex still needs approval from the state's planning minister, Nick Champion. The uptake of green technology like electric vehicles and wind turbines is driving a push to source key materials in Australia. But the potentially lucrative economic opportunity has also revived an old debate about the impact of mining rich and plentiful farming lands.
South Australia's limestone coast is one of the state's agricultural powerhouses. But for Ken Turner, his mixed farming property has attracted the interests of mining companies hunting for rare earth elements.
They believe there are viable quantities of mineral under the ground here.
Mr Turner's property lies within a 20 square kilometre area earmarked for potential mining. The fledgling Copper project is part of a wave of development aimed at digging up the rare earth elements needed to build electric vehicles and wind turbines.
We see a great opportunity for Australia to develop the rare earth industry. It's a potential to provide jobs and investment.
Most of the world's rare earths come from China, but the push is on to develop a local industry to supply Australia's trading partners.
So I see South Australia's role is actually potentially being that trusted, secure supply of these resources.
The environmental credentials of the Copper project are still being assessed, and any potential mining here is still several years away. But local producers are concerned about the potential impacts on this rich agricultural land. An opposition group, chaired by farmer Todd Woodard, is concerned about how any future mine here would be rehabilitated.
Getting the macro minerals back in there, the phosphorus and that sort of thing is one thing. Putting the biology back in there is completely different.
While Ken Turner shares some of the group's concerns, he's waiting for more information.
We value our soils, we value our water, we value the environment we live in, so we will be looking very closely when they have a proposal.
A critical issue for Australia's food and financial security. Josh Bryan, ABC News, Rattenbully.
Democrats have stepped up their attacks on Donald Trump after a comedian opening a rally for the former president called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. The Trump campaign has distanced itself from the remarks. With just over a week before Election Day, the fallout underscores the importance of the Latino vote in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. North America correspondent Jade McMillan is there.
Just a few months ago, Joe Biden was a candidate in this election. Instead, the president lined up in his home state of Delaware to cast an early ballot for his deputy.
And this is your ballot. You can step right on the floor.
Joe Biden also using the opportunity to weigh in on a scandal on the other side of politics.
Just simply embarrassing. It's beneath any president.
Donald Trump's campaign has tried to distance itself from a comedian's remarks at the former president's recent Madison Square Garden rally.
But there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump said the comment didn't reflect his views about the US territory, while his running mate tried to play the whole thing down.
I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke, but I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America.
People living in Puerto Rico aren't allowed to vote in presidential elections. But in the critical state of Pennsylvania, more than 50% of eligible Latino residents are of Puerto Rican descent.
He said a lot of things about Latinos coming from South America through the border. So, you know, it's just, you know, it's people, I guess, are used to, his behaviour.
Kamala Harris's campaign has seized on the opening.
They want a president of the United States who's about uplifting the people and not berating, not calling America a garbage can.
With just over a week until Election Day, both candidates are spending most of their time and money in the 7 states where the race is considered to be competitive. Today it was Georgia and Michigan, but they'll be in Pennsylvania later this week, and it could be the biggest prize.
Erie County in the state's northwest has picked the winner at every presidential election since 2008.
And he did nothing for us, so we have to give her the opportunity to show us.
I just don't like his delivery system sometimes. He's very brash, and that's fine. That is who Donald Trump is.
A battleground within a battleground that could prove decisive. Jade McMillan, ABC News, Erie, Pennsylvania.
Myer is set for a merger in a deal worth almost $1 billion. The department store wants to join forces with a company which owns chain stores Just Jeans and Portman's.
Many people know Myer for its perfume counters and its long history in Australia.
Familiar landmark, Myers of Melbourne is one of the big 6 in world retailing.
However, these days, the retailer has been struggling with its profit margins, and younger Australians like Shay and Delora are shopping online instead.
Not a lot of range. I don't think that I'm their target market.
Now Myer is betting its future on a merger.
This is about ensuring that Myer, which is 125 years old, can continue to be a sustainable business.
The deal would see Myer buy up 5 retail chains, including Just Jeans, Dotti and Portman's. All of these are brands that are currently owned by Solomon Lew's Premier Investments.
I'm personally very excited by this transaction and will be joining the board of Myer as well as remaining its chairman of Premier Investments.
The deal is worth almost $1 billion. It still needs sign-off from the consumer watchdog and shareholders.
We're going to vote for the merger. We believe that the merger is transformational.
This retail analyst says the deal is a dud.
Trying to bridge the gap from 13 or 12 up to 80 is problematic. What I would do is I'd rebrand Myer.
Myer's pushing ahead with this merger at the same time that another Australian legacy retailer has collapsed. The owner of Rivers, Noni B and Katie's just entered voluntary administration, which is putting 3,000 jobs at risk.
I think it's dead and buried. I'd be surprised if someone tried to resurrect it.
Tough times for retail prompting major mergers. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
To finance now, the Australian dollar continued to fall today, but the local share market managed its 3rd rise in a row. Here's Alan Kohler.
Financial markets are betting that next week's election will see the return of inflation and a limit on further US rate cuts because both candidates plan to lift the budget deficit with spending and/or tax cuts. So the US dollar is rising and the Aussie dollar has dropped 5% in a month to 65.6 US cents today. Here's a chart of US government debt as a percentage of GDP since the War of Independence. Apart from World War II, it's the highest it's ever been. And here's what the Congressional Budget Office is predicting will happen based on existing policies before the election promises increase it some more. The share market rose 1/3 of 1% today, led by banks and miners and Premier Investments, which is selling 3 of its retail businesses to Myer. Guess which company investors think is doing better out of the deal? Premier is up 10%, Myer down 1.6%. And here's a chart comparing the share prices of Myer and Premier over the past 10 years. Myer has halved, Premier has tripled. Its market value is now more than 6 times that of Myer. And that's because Premier's profit margin is close to 10%, while Myer's is 2.3%. Now, today's deal is complicated, but basically Myer is issuing shares to Premier in return for Just Jeans, Dotti, JJ's and some cash. And Premier Solomon Lew ends up with 26% of Myer and goes on the board to teach them how to make a margin of 10%. They hope. Most global markets went up today, apart from China's. Oil fell a bit more and the iron ore price jumped 2.5%. Oh, and tomorrow is quarterly CPI day, which will decide if and when we get a rate cut. The RBA is looking for 3% headline, 3.5% core. If it's less, happy days. And that's finance.
A spectacular goal from Kyra Cooney-Cross has helped the Matildas upset Germany 2-1 in Duisburg. The world number 4 Germany took an early lead in the friendly international. Australia answered with a long-range strike from Cooney-Cross in the 39th minute. It was her first goal for the Matildas. Claire Hunt also scored her maiden international goal as the Matildas beat Germany for the first time in 19 years. T20 World Cup winning wicketkeeper Matthew Wade has announced his retirement from international cricket effective immediately. The 36-year-old Tasmanian played 97 one-day internationals and 92 T20 matches for Australia, his last at this year's T20 World Cup in North America. Wade has been announced as Australia's wicket-keeping and fielding coach for next month's T20 series against Pakistan. He'll continue to play domestic one-day cricket for Tasmania and in the Big Bash for the Hobart Hurricanes. For years, the Adelaide United women's team has struggled to make its mark on the A-League competition. Its best finish, only an elimination final loss a couple of seasons ago. After a poor season last year, the club has brought back a dynamic duo along with 3 internationals in the hopes it can bounce back.
A team yet to feel success after 16 years in the league. A wooden spoon last year, leaving them hungrier to turn it around this season.
It wasn't our best season, but the good thing is we know how to bounce back. We're professionals and we know what to do, and I think because it was not our favourite season, we want to try and prove ourselves and prove to the league that we're a finals contending team.
The Adelaide United's women's team have had a poor record since the Women's A-League began in 2008. It's the only inaugural club without a grand final berth.
We feel like we can be really competitive and win more matches this year and hopefully push us higher up the table.
Last season, a lack of consistency was to blame, along with issues on both ends of the pitch.
We've got a lot to prove. We know that we're better than what we showed last season, and so we are very hungry to turn it around and make sure that we have a really positive year this year.
A positive pre-season coupled with the return of the danger duo in Fiona Wirtz and Chelsea Dorber has the players hopeful they can be the team's saviour for its attacking woes. The last time the two played together for the Reds, they kicked 23 goals collectively in a season where the team finished a club-high 3rd and making it to an elimination final.
I'm hoping both of them get firing, and if we can do that again, I think we'll be an unstoppable team.
The Reds have further boosted their squad, bringing in 3 more international players, with one of them hoping to provide more attacking options.
I have a very strong kind of focus to go forward, and I think last year they struggled, I guess, kind of scoring some goals, and I hope I can kind of help them out with that and get some goals in the back of the net.
The team believe a strong off-season and hunger will hold the squad in good stead this season. Nethma Dandenia, ABC News.
On to all the weather details now, and tonight's photo of ghost mushrooms was taken in Mount Gambier and sent to us by Sudha Shanmugaraja. It was mostly sunny across Adelaide today. It reached a top of 24.5 degrees at 2:30 this afternoon after an overnight low of 8.3. Further afield, a high-pressure system south of the Bight brought clear skies across most of the state. It reached 27 degrees in Whyalla and 21 in Port Lincoln. Onto the charts, and cloud developing over eastern Queensland, northeastern New South Wales, the top end and far western parts of our state is generating showers and storms in troughs. A front will bring cooler winds to the far south, mostly clear elsewhere under a high. Looking around the country, thunderstorms in Darwin with 34 degrees, a top of 27 in Brisbane and 18 degrees for Hobart. Closer to home, partly cloudy about the north tomorrow. It'll reach 34 degrees in Lee Creek and 31 in Port Pirie. A chance of isolated light showers about the lower southeast coast, 29 in Clare and 26 for Keith. It'll be clear and sunny in the city tomorrow. We're heading for a top of 26 degrees, dropping to 11 overnight. On the waters, variable winds below 10 knots, becoming southwesterly to 15 knots about midday, and seas increasing to 1 metre. Sunrise at 6:15 with sunset at 7:45. And looking further ahead, partly cloudy on Thursday with 24 degrees, a chance of showers on Sunday with 28, and a fine 25 degrees forecast for this time next week. And that's the latest from the Adelaide newsroom. Thanks for your company this evening. I'm Jessica Harmsen. Stay with us, 7:30's next.